Hi, it's Chris Moore with Senior Remodeling Experts. Welcome to Aging in Place is a Team Sport. It's a video series where we talk to different providers. We explore how families, professionals, and communities can come together to help older adults live safely, comfortably, and independently at home. I'm here to guide you, connect you with the right resources, and help make the rest of your life the best of your life. Welcome back to Aging in Place is a Team Sport, where we talk to providers and helpers and people who make a difference in people's lives, who are choosing to make the rest of their life the best of their life in their own home. And today I have with me Maegan Blau. Maegan is the founder of Blue Copper Design. She's an interior designer specializing in universal design. So I'm really excited to get into the conversation, and welcome to the show, Maegan.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. So I think that a lot more people today have an understanding of the term universal design than when I first started learning about this space probably 18 years ago. But for those who maybe are not real clear on what that means, how about we start out with you give us your definition of universal design?
Yeah, great question. I always like to start with understanding the different kinds of accessibilities. Like you said, I own an interior design studio. I mostly focus on residential spaces. I've had a few commercial clients, but really like focusing on customizing homes is what my whole passion is. I feel like we often misuse the accessibility terms and like apply them to places where they are not really meant to be applied. So in my realm, like I actually think I focus more on accessibility as a whole and then the terms within that. So, we have ADA design, universal design, barrier free design, and then of course aging in place. So to me, I don't even, I mean, it is to me, but universal design, I think, is one of those terms that gets really misused, but people have like well intentions for it. But universal design is a practice that was born in 1997. It has 7 sets of principles. And it's really, to me, like another evolution of designing commercial spaces. So it's like ADA design, at least in America, is kind of the baseline for accessibility requirements. Universal design goes beyond that, where you're applying those 7 principles to a space. And with that, like there's no set guidelines. Like with ADA, you have to have grab bars at a certain height, a 5 foot turn radius in bathrooms, at least a 32-inch door, ramps at, a certain grade. But like universal design doesn't have those requirements like numerically. You're not going to find that outlined anywhere. But it's more like taking those 7 principles, thinking about how people are using the space and applying it that way. So in a home sense, and universal design is also like the overall practice of having a space be the most usable in the most equal way by the most amount of people. So in a home sense, like that actually sometimes that's the goal, but a lot of the times it's not in our practice. So it's more about like customization to the client, but we're taking those like universal design principles and the way that they think and kind of applying it. So
Yeah. Well, universal design was kind of developed in an academic setting, and a lot of the way that it is expressed and communicated retains that academic flavor. If you read
mhm,
the 7 principles, they're kind of academic.
mhm,
And the idea of to me of universal design is that why are we differentiating in the first place? Why do
yes.
we say, regular houses are for regular people and then everybody else that has so-called special needs, then we have to make accommodations for them and we have to
Mhm.
change things around so that this space works for them. I've read studies that said that only 15% of us will live our entire lifespan without a mobility impairment of one kind or another at one time or another in our life.
Okay.
Maybe we broke our leg skiing and it's, 6 weeks, or maybe it's some other reason and it's permanent. But
Mhm.
regardless, why are we designing and building homes for 15% of the population? It
That's a
doesn't
very
make
good
any
question.
any sense. And so when we think about it in those terms, then I think that that kind of sheds light on what we're talking about.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying on that. I've said before and I've said it again, separate but equal is never really equal. And I think, as a country, we've learned that lesson in one way, but it's not applied to people with disabilities or aging in place. So I use a wheelchair. I'm a quadriplegic. I've been paralyzed for 17 years almost. I hate having to follow that little blue guy. And by the little blue guy, I mean the handicap symbol. Like, I can't tell you, anybody who uses a wheelchair for a long period of time, like, will tell you you're constantly having to follow the blue guy. You're constantly having to be like, okay, everyone can go this way. Where do I have to go? Everything is very segmented and separated. And I think in a commercial sense, especially. And I think people think that that is progress or like the issue was fixed because, like, well, we did make an accommodation for somebody in a wheelchair. And like accommodation is like a word that I actually hate, which I could talk more about. But I don't, to me, universal design is like like I said, everyone's using the same space in as much of the same way as they possibly can. But like if I have to go, if I've gone, I went to restaurants in New York City and in Boston, and I have to go this way, that way, up a ramp, down a ramp, through the back of the kitchen to get into the restaurant where everyone can just go through the front door, but the front door has 5 steps up to it.
Uh,
So, but they're like, look, we found a way for you to get in. It's like, yeah, but that sucks. Like that whole process like made me feel very different than every other.
Kind of makes you feel like a second class citizen, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's separate. Like to me, it's always separate. Like a wheelchair section at a concert is separate. Even like handicap and disabled parking, though it's very needed, it's very separate. Like if a parking lot has one or two disabled parking spots and those are gone, then there is no more space for me because that was the space for me. In a public bathroom, like if the handicap stall is taken, well, I can't use the other four. So why is it just that I am in the separate one where if someone without mobility issues or a certain kind of mobility issues, they have more access to things. It's very interesting and eye opening. And so from
Yeah, I was at a
that standpoint,
facility recently, and it was a big public facility. It was a horse center where they have horse shows, and in the bathroom there was a separate room, okay, with a door saying this is the handicap toilet, and the door was, I mean, it took effort for me to open the door,
oh yeah,
right?
those
I mean, the door was
super
plenty
heavy
wide
doors.
enough, but it was a heavy door that was difficult, required a lot of force. It did not comply with the principle that says low physical effort
Hmm.
at all. I think for anybody to open that door in a wheelchair would have been difficult. Now, I'm sure there
Hmm.
are people that do it. I've seen people in wheelchairs, doing gymnastics with their wheelchair strapped to them. So there are certainly people that use wheelchairs that have massive upper body strength and are incredible athletes. And so wheelchair users are no more monolithic than any other group of people.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, there's a very big difference between that athlete and a, 96-year-old frail person who can walk a few steps. They just don't have a lot of strength, right? And so the slope of a ramp that might technically comply with ADA still isn't necessarily going to work for everybody.
Hmm.
If you're
And I
if
think,
you're manually pushing yourself and you don't have any upper body strength to speak of, any slope is going to be pretty much very difficult to do.
yeah, totally. I think all too often, as you know, Chris, like people use the ADA to just check the box and move on and get their permits approved, which sometimes I'm like, how did you even get a permit approved for some of this? Like that didn't check the box, which, is a whole other story. To me, these are design decisions. Like these are spaces for humans designed and made by humans. It's not aware that like nature, the forest, the beach, those places don't have inherent accessibility built into it. But if we are humans making human things for humans by humans, like there's no reason to not think through all of those different kinds of users of a space or, all of these different design decisions. And I think I do see the tide shifting where general accessibility and universal design is starting to no longer be looked at as a negative thing. Like that's been such a huge stigma that it's uglier, it costs more, it's more involved, it's going to take more time, whatever people's reasons are. There's so many cool spaces that are designed accessible that you wouldn't even be able to like pick it out. And it just enhances the overall look and function of everything. Yeah, I think, what I do is like really talking about those decisions that could be made and implemented to make spaces better.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a one of the hallmarks of good universal design is that you don't notice it
Mhm.
until, you start using it or
Mhm.
until you recognize that, hey, wow, that was easier than what I expected. Or, but it's not obvious,
Mhm.
like the difference between a ramp on the front of the house and a gently sloping walkway that was done with grading and sidewalks and landscaping and, just looks like it was just put there to enhance the beauty of the house.
Mhm.
And, the other thing is we talk about zero step entries. And while they certainly benefit someone using a wheelchair for mobility, they benefit a young couple with a baby in a baby stroller just as much. They
Mhm.
benefit the delivery guy delivering the new refrigerator probably more than
Mhm.
anybody.
Yeah. 100%. They help you with a wagon full of groceries or your beach equipment, or it's just most of these things are never going to be negatively impacting able-bodied people, but they are like make or break decisions for people with disabilities or aging in place needs or things like that. So I think talking about building homes especially, but obviously like other places from that perspective has been important in my business. And like with my firsthand experience of being paralyzed, so to this day, I'm still like I run a business, I'm very independent, like, I live in my house, and I still have trouble traveling, like, to hotels, and when I first noticed that was when I first got injured, we redid parts of my parents' house and my bedroom so that I could live easier, and then I went to a hotel one time, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't do anything on my own," where, like, back at my house, I could do everything on my own, and I was like, "This isn't a me problem, like, this is a space problem." Like,
Yeah.
this has nothing to do with me. Like, I am not inadequate because I can live completely on my own and have been. Yeah, I just think only having certain options, like a couple accessible rooms in a hotel or, one handicap stall, like I think that's where things get really limited. And I would like to see, I kind of call it like the third wave of accessibility. I think right now we're in the first wave, like in the 70s to 90s, like we were in the first, or I'm sorry, we're in the second wave now, like in the 70s, 90s and things. So it was kind of the first wave of accessibility, like getting the ADA passed. I kind of see like the second wave is a lot more people are a lot more understanding of accessibility in general, but like the third wave, which I don't know if the world's like there yet mentally, but I hope they will be soon, is like that really seamless like integration of accessibility where it's not like, and that house is accessible and beautiful. It's like I'm like, yeah, I just want it like a beautiful house. Like, let's just call it a beautiful house, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that is about education because
Mhm.
if home buying market, the home buying public demands a feature, then builders will build it. If tomorrow nobody would consider buying a house without a zero step entry, right? If we could flip a switch and everybody that's going out to look at houses tomorrow would walk up to a house and say, ew, there's no zero step entry. I'm not buying that house, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it would change overnight.
You think that that's a really good point. I see in the world I'm in, like, that's what I hear all the time is people, like, demanding it and builders being like, "We don't care," or, like, they're not doing it, or but I also think
Well,
because, like, when you're in this go ahead.
the difference is what my scenario said everybody demanded it, right?
Mm,
If 10% or 30% of the buying public is demanding it, the builder can say, I don't care about you. I've got plenty of people who are not asking for that feature,
mhm. Yeah,
right?
that's a good
If
point.
everybody was asking for it, I mean, like imagine building a house without any electricity in it and
Yeah.
an outhouse in the backyard.
right?
That's a
And
really good analogy.
trying to sell that in today's market.
Right.
I'd say, but you can buy oil lamps. There's a wood stove in the kitchen to do your cooking with.
Mhm.
What is wrong with you? Well, I mean,
That's
that's not the way people
mhm.
live, right? And so
Yeah.
that could be the goal for housing. And that is the goal for those of us that, that operate in this space because, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
If that was the way people thought. And the other framework that I've been using recently is that I, people use the word disability. And when they say disability, they generally mean an inability to do a certain thing, whatever that certain thing is. But I contend that a disability is not primarily an inability to do a thing. It's a disconnect between your ability and the environment in which you're operating.
Mhm.
And you made the perfect illustration of that when you were talking about going to a hotel room. You had
Mhm.
your house that worked for you and your abilities. Then you went to a hotel room that did not work for you and your abilities. And the
Mhm.
example I use is if I walk up to a house and it has 7-foot tall steps instead of
Mm.
7-inch tall steps, then I'm disabled in relation to that house
Mhm.
because I can't climb a 7-foot tall step.
Yeah.
And
That's such a great distinction.
and that's no different than you rolling up to a house and it has 1 7-inch step,
Mhm.
right? And it's not that you're disabled, it's that the house is not a fit for your abilities.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, no.
I think that takes the personal aspect out of the equation.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely does. And I think a lot of people I've found, like, it's not even necessarily that they're resistant to accessibility features or universal design practices or like even thinking about that. It's that, like you're saying, it's an education disconnect too. Like no one's talking about it. There's so many times where like when you can talk to somebody like human to human and be like, just because you don't have an immediate need doesn't mean that this can't benefit you later at
Mhm.
some point in life, like that famous phrase, like I'd rather need it and have it than, or what is, I'd rather have it
I'd rather have it and not need it.
and not need it than need it and not have
Right,
it. Yes,
right.
I'm like, wait, I got twisted around. And I always say, like, by the time you need it, it's too late. Like, there's a really big misconception that these features can be added easily, and it's not that they can't, but it's a renovation process. And if anyone's gone through a renovation, you know the time, the effort, the money, the energy it takes. So if you're in a pickle, if you're in a pinch, if you're in a time crunch for like, I would like to take a shower in some point this week, and you're not going to be able to remodel your shower. But if we were to build the house from the beginning, or if you're already going through a renovation and you don't need those things yet, like having that having that proactive approach to it, I think it's people are starting to catch on more.
They
Some
are.
people don't, and that's interesting. That's even more interesting to me sometimes. But
Yeah. Well, in my experience, the people that are proactive, the people that get it are usually people who have had some personal experience. They've been a
hmm
caregiver, they've had some experience with trying to help somebody navigate an environment that was not a good suit for their ability, a good fit for their
hmm
abilities. And they've realized how difficult that can be. And they don't want to go through what they saw someone else go through.
hmm Yeah, and they realize, like I said, the extent, like the lengthy process it is to change something
Mhm.
like that. So
Yeah.
some things can be done easily, but to me, that's where like the accommodation comes in, and that's like a bad word for me. Like I don't, I want it to be designed, like I want it to be well designed, not accommodated for.
Right.
To me,
Right.
accommodation is like an afterthought.
Right. Whereas intentional design is we designed it that way from the beginning because we believed that that was the best design we could have.
hmm
And a lot of that, is mindset. I mean, that's why I wrote the book, Age Out Loud, because I saw so many people who were limited by their belief about aging and about disability and about, if they admit that the regular house doesn't work for them, then that means there's something wrong with them. It means
hmm
that they now believe that they're, in a period of decline and things are going to get worse and worse and worse. And they don't want to think
hmm
that way. So they avoid the discussion. They put their head in the sand like an ostrich and just don't want to talk about it. And
hmm
I've heard that hundreds of times, hundreds of times.
Do you see a difference, Chris, with like different generations going through that, or has it been across the board?
That's a great question. I mean, I feel like there's some movement in the right direction, but I can't really isolate it by generation,
Mm,
by age, really. I isolate it by more by life experience. I mean, I definitely see
mm,
those who've been caregivers are more open to having the discussion. People who have seen, other aspects of life, people who have, personal acquaintances who have maybe been through an experience like you've been through. We're doing a project right now. A 12-year-old little girl was out sledding and her sled took a bounce in the wrong direction and she went headfirst into a tree. C4 spinal injury. She's been at the Shepherd Center in Atlanta and
mhm,
she's coming home sometime in the next month or so. And she's making some progress and everybody's hoping and praying that she will recover and regain the use of her arms and legs. But we're trying to make the house, workable for her to come home.
mhm,
And so it's not about age, it's really not, which is why I don't really like the term aging in place because, it's not really about aging at all.
mhm,
Now, statistically, their older demographics are more likely to have mobility challenges than the younger group as a percentage of the population. But that's not to say that, people of all ages have different abilities, have
mhm,
mobility challenges, have sensory challenges, I mean, they just have different abilities.
mhm.
So, I don't know how to ask this, but the typical client that you serve when they come to you, are they often like contemplating a renovation? Are they getting ready to build a new house? Have they just recently had some kind of life event happen that makes this something they are considering? How would you describe, and I'm sure there's a wide range of people that come to you for your services, but paint for us a picture, if you will, of who your clients tend to be.
Yeah, good question. There is a wide range. Most of our projects have been renovations, pretty intense renovations. I would love to get some more new build clients and dabble into that more. But we've, really back when I first started my business, I took on just like everybody, I was just taking what I could get. I've had my business as my 8th year of business. And now the past couple of years, I'm refining more. I always knew I wanted to pretty exclusively take on people with mobility needs or accessibility needs. So that's a pretty big requirement for us now. There's only like maybe I would design my friend's house, but I'm going to talk to them still about accessibility. So but from people who have had children with disabilities, we've had a few clients that with that, scope of work. We've had caregivers, usually like the children of parents doing the renovation on behalf of their parents. We've had a few projects like that. And then we've had people with disabilities themselves in the middle age range. And then we've also had quite a few people who are just planning for the future that have no relation, like current relation to disability or aging needs or accessibility needs. So
Mhm.
it's really just anyone who one needs accessibility needs now, but then two, like understands that they might want to need it. They might need it in the future.
Okay. So your criteria would be that people have an awareness, really, is what it sounds like,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, that people have an awareness. I mean, I think we attract that naturally, which is
Yeah.
great. A lot of people are like, how do you convince people that they need accessibility needs? I'm like, they don't. They're coming to me because they know that they do in one way or another. And so I don't have that. I don't have a lot of those conversations. But I guess like something that we do focus on more though is someone who also equally wants a design experience and a design process and like an elevated outcome. So if somebody just needs, like a small bathroom redone and they just need like a tub shower combo switched out to a roll-in shower, we're not really a good fit for that because on like a lower budget, you know what I mean? Like if we want to redo the whole bathroom and we're caring equally about the light fixture and the tile selection as we are like your accessibility needs, like that's where like we're going to shine for people. So, yeah,
Sure.
our business model is like a traditional interior design firm.
Okay. And where are you located?
I'm in Arizona, in the
Okay.
Phoenix area. Yeah,
Okay.
but we take projects all over the country. And then I also offer consulting. So, for consulting clients, those people usually have plans already. So, they're already working with a builder, an architect, maybe a designer. and they, for one reason or another, they're not needing a full design plan. So they're not needing selections and drawings because they already have that covered, but they just need eyes on like the accessibility portion of it.
Yeah. 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 I get those kind of calls too from a contractor.
Hmm.
They already have a builder, but the builder's not really understanding what their needs are. And they, would
Hmm.
you review these plans for me and tell me what things I should consider incorporating?
Yeah. And I have like my group of builders here in Arizona that I use. One particularly specializes in accessibility, but I tell people, I'm like, you don't necessarily need a builder who specializes in accessibility because people ask me that all the time. I'm like, you need a builder who can understand construction documents, who can follow direction, who has like an ounce of free like wiggle room and creativity. Like I much prefer a builder who has a level of openness than somebody who has a level of knowledge of the accessibility, because I'm going to be the one dictating, like me and my firm and my drawings and my plans. That's what's dictating what you are building. And so we have like a really robust process in order to get all that information from the client of what they're needing.
Yeah.
And honestly, people with accessibility knowledge usually means like they know how to build to ADA code. That's what I've found. And though that's useful and needed, sometimes that's like it's too rigid. Like it's
Yeah.
hard for them to shake that. And I'm like, I need you to forget about the ADA code on this project completely. Like, yeah. So that's an interesting part of like residential design, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. We did a project. We do a lot of VA grant work for
Mm-hmm.
disabled veterans. And, most of the VA MPR's minimum property requirements are very similar to ADA, not identical, but, along the same lines. But we did a project for a veteran who's blind. He's very mobile. He just can't see. And
Mm-hmm.
so obviously his needs were quite different than trying to design around a wheelchair. We're trying to
Mm-hmm.
design around a person who navigates by sound rather than by sight,
Mm-hmm.
which,
Yeah, it's a whole different, there's not, I mean, unless I might not know about it, like, there's not really a lot of regulation or, resources that you're gonna find out in the world. Like, that is just a good designer, a good builder, a good architect listening to their client, which is
right.
what people do in the home industry anyway, because honestly, like, our clients know themselves better than anybody's going to know them. So even though, like, I have the perspective of being paralyzed, like, I also know that, like, that's a very small portion of it. I don't bring the way that I live into my clients' designs.
Hmm.
But what I feel like it does give me is a different perspective that, like, people who haven't had this experience just they can't get it. Like, they don't get it. Just because I live in this certain way being paralyzed doesn't mean that the person I'm talking to that's paralyzed also lives in that way, but, like, I can have a relation to it in a
Right.
way.
Well, because when you had your accident, it changed the way you do everything, right? And
Mhm.
you had to re-engineer your life,
Mhm.
okay, how am I going to negotiate this aspect of my life in my new reality? How am I going to negotiate that aspect of my life in my new reality? You had to figure all that out. And that process of figuring that out for yourself, I'm sure it developed skills that now help you figure out that process for other people. It's
Mhm.
different circumstances, but it's the same process. It's the same
Yeah, it's the same
mental
line of thinking.
pathway that you have to follow.
Mhm. Yeah, so I haven't done a lot of work with people with, like, blindness or low vision. I've done a couple projects where we focused on, like, contrast, like a high level of contrast for people with low vision, and I've explored that. I get that question a lot, though, on social media, and I would love to explore that, but I'm like, just because I am not blind, I don't have to be blind to be able to, like, understand or at least be able to know what questions to ask to lead me to understand to the best of my ability what the client would need, you know?
Yeah. I saw a documentary years ago, and it's about this man who is an engineer for a NASCAR racing team. And he was born without any arms. And the documentary went into his parents saying that, when we saw him, he was so beautiful. And then we didn't even notice he didn't have arms at first. And then when we
Mm,
did, we just decided that he was going to live a regular life. And he had to figure out how to make that work. And so it had pictures of him as a kid. He was riding his bike. He had a like a chin rest on instead of handlebars, and he could steered with his
Mm.
chin. When he was in high school, he built himself a car and welded with his feet and had the steering wheel on the floor and all this stuff. And then the hiring manager is on there and he said, "Oh, I saw this guy's application and I'm going to have to tell this guy without any arms that, he's not hired and I'm going to feel like a real jerk." And oh my gosh, I wish. And then, but he said after he interviewed him, not only was he qualified, he was so much more qualified than any of the other candidates that it wasn't even a contest because
Mhm.
this man had spent his entire life figuring out different ways to make things work.
Mhm.
And so when he's figuring out different ways to make a race car faster, I mean, that's just his jam. That's what he's been doing all his life. Wouldn't it?
Mhm.
It wasn't a job. That's who he is. And
Right.
that really stuck with me. And it shows how so many times what we see as a liability becomes our greatest asset.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. I think having to constantly figure things out is such a skill
Yeah.
and something that I value. Looking back, I was young when my accident happened. I was 17, but even back then, like, I always admired people that figured things out. Like, there's a way to figure it out, and I don't have a lot of patience for the like, oh well, it doesn't work. Like, like we tried, it didn't work, and sometimes things take a lot more time or more money or more effort to figure things out, but there's always a way. And I think that's something that you're touching on. Like
Yeah.
that guy has had to figure out more things than we would ever know. More things than he would probably ever know that like
Yeah.
makes his brain have different pathways and different connections. He can bring that into so many different situations. So
Yeah.
I admire
Well,
that in people.
if you think about it, if you look around and see all the things we enjoy in our modern life, you flip a switch and the lights come on, computers and cars and airplanes and things that if you never saw one before, you would say, that's impossible.
Mhm.
How does that metal tube that weighs hundreds of tons, fly 5 feet in the air? That doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
But all of these things were created in somebody's imagination
Mhm.
before they became reality. And somebody who saw it in their imagination tried and tried and tried and tried and tried until they succeeded.
Mhm.
And it's the same way with everything that we create. It's the same way with this vision we're talking about of a world where accessible homes are the norm,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, accessible homes are the norm to where we don't even have to call them accessible homes.
Exactly. It's just a home.
Like, we take airplane like you're describing, we take airplanes for granted so much. We can't imagine a world where we don't have them in this day and age, but, like, what an incredible feat of engineering and imagination that was, like you're saying, to the point where, like, when you think about it, like, that should be impossible because it was impossible for so
Right.
many times. So it's not that, like, at what point can we get, like, the accessibility world in a residential and even still a commercial space to that level of
Mhm.
thinking where it's like, "Wait, what?" And you know what? I will give credit to the ADA and the level of accessibility that we do have here in the States. I've been fortunate enough to travel, make it a priority. I've been to several countries, I've been to all the states, and, like, the fact that America does have the American with Disabilities Act is impressive. Like, even Canada doesn't have any, like, federal legislation demanding accessibility. I get constant DMs from people who are, like, constantly trying to start campaigns up in Canada because they don't have any requirements, and so you're really just, or the requirements are, like, loose and it's not as robust as what the ADA requires, and other countries are like that as well. Like, that's actually I don't for my own personal, like, knowledge, I've been doing some research on, like, different accessibility in countries around the world, and it's pretty grim. The fact that we have what we have here is something to be celebrated. I just think, like, we need to build upon it. We can't just let it stop where it is, or we also need to have people understand that that's the minimum, the absolute bare minimum, not the
Right.
maximum. I was at an event, so I can't take credit for this saying, but it was an event for architects, and one of the architects said, like, the ADA should be the floor, not the ceiling, and I quote that all the time now because I think it's such a great way to look at it.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
But yeah, when I was first, like, in the inpatient hospital, I had a nurse who, used a wheelchair, And she was paralyzed for, my gosh, probably like 30 or 40 years at that point, like a very long time. And she went to nursing school at the same college that I went to, at ASU, Arizona State. And no part of the campus was accessible. Like she had to get carried up and down flights of stairs every single day to go to her classes. And I was like, I don't like school that much. Like if that was me, I've never, I've never had that experience 20 years later after she went to that school, or 30 years or whatever it was. And I was like, I probably wouldn't go. Like the fact that she, I think we also, that inspirational message of like disability, people with disabilities, like overcoming, those kinds of situations gets taught it as like, look at how amazing she is. And then at my head, I'm like, it's only because she had to be. She didn't have another choice. Or she did have a choice, and it was to not do it.
Right.
So, there's a level of tenacity and grit that like you do have to respect in somebody, but it's only because for every one of her, there's 1,000 people that decided not to take on that challenge, or that they couldn't take on that challenge for X, Y, and Z. And so it's not necessarily that, like, yes, she is amazing, but it's not for the same facts that you're giving to her. It's because she's overcoming a world that like is really unjust. And so that was pre 88 times. And that always stuck with me too. Just like how grateful I am to those people, and like the people that came before me with disabilities, so that I can now live in a world where I don't have to get carried up and down the stairs to go to a college class. Like that I am now able to take that for granted.
Right.
Like, thank you.
Right.
We have to remember the progress of what happened and what got us from point A to point B.
Well, that's a great point because it illustrates how whatever situation we find ourselves in, we can always look for the things to be grateful for, or we can look for the things to complain about. Right.
Mhm.
And just because we're grateful for the advancements we have doesn't mean we're not going to stop pushing for more. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't wanna ever stop at the complaint, or stop at, like, the gratitude too, but I hear a lot of complaining from people in my community, and I'm like, "Imagine what it would have been in the '70s for us." Like, we're soft compared to that, but I'm so great. Yes, it should be the way that it is now, and it should be even better, and we'll get there, but we also can't, like, in the very short history, not forget what else people had to live with.
Yeah.
They would've, some people really, truly, actually died for the rights that we have today in that sense.
Yeah. Well, and some people just like to complain.
And some people like to complain, and sometimes I like to complain, and it's fine. But you have to have, like, the action behind it, in my
But it's
opinion.
it's usually the people with the least to complain about that do the most complaining. At least that's been my observation, you know? And the people that actually have a legitimate reason to complain about something, they're in a struggle or in a situation where they really have to, work twice as hard as most people to accomplish the same thing. Usually they got pretty good attitudes and they're just like, I'm not gonna let this stop me and I don't care how long it takes me and I don't care how hard I have to work. This is my goal and I'm not gonna quit till I get there.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I guess I have a lot of respect for people with that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been really good, Megan. I'm glad that we made this happen. So, if people are, you said you work all over the country, so you can anybody anywhere in the country that has a design situation that they would like some help with. What do they send you? Plans, send you pictures? You do Zoom calls? How does that?
Yeah. Yeah, I can do my process mostly virtually of the project. Like I have a project in San Diego right now that's a pretty big one. So we fly out there a couple times throughout the project and see it in person. But yeah, if anyone's interested in working with us, just fill out the contact form on our website. Like I said, we offer full service design and then consulting. So just depending on what service is best for your needs, we have a different process for both of those. And I also offer consulting to like industry professionals too. So architects, builders, other designers, if they want, like they have a project that they want accessibility help on and they want us to consult with them directly. Like those are actually probably my favorite because we get to go through a lot and, talk about all of our industry jargon.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's open to everyone.
Awesome. So, tell the listeners your website.
Yeah, it's bluecopper.design. Or if you just Google Blue Copper Design, you'll find us. And
Okay.
then all of our social media handles, Instagram and TikTok is Blue Copper Design as well. And that's how I met Chris actually. Was through a TikTok video, your daughter
Yeah, Rebecca.
introduced us.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I love the internet. The internet does great things.
It does. I mean, like everything else, I mean, it can be used for good or for evil
Hmm.
but it certainly allows you to reach people who are interested in what you have to say way easier than it used to be.
Hmm.
If you think about 50 years ago, you and I couldn't have this conversation. I mean, we probably wouldn't know
No.
about each other. I mean, because
Hmm.
there wasn't that interconnectedness. And, if we did find out about each other and we're on a long distance phone call that was, $8 a minute or whatever.
I know we'd be pen pals, or we would have to meet at a conference in person or something, and it's just
Right.
such a smaller circle. I just stay on the good side of the internet, and then it's great. So
Yeah.
I have a good time on the good side of the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So blue copper design, anybody just, look for blue copper design, they're going to find you.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. Do you have any final thoughts or anything that you feel like we didn't touch on in this conversation that you'd like to say?
No, I really appreciate the conversation, Chris. I like the open dialogue of everything. And I am like a quarter of the way through your book. So I'll send you an email when I'm done. And I just appreciate all the work you're doing and having me on. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, great, Megan. Well, I will thank you for being here. I appreciate your insights. I appreciate the work you're doing and advocating for universal design and inclusion and, letting everybody have a seat at the table.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that wraps up another segment of Aging in Place is a Team Sport. I hope you will continue to listen to our podcast, download episodes, and subscribe and tell your friends about us. So, signing off on Aging in Place is a Team Sport, I'm Chris Moore with Senior Remodeling Expert.